We have a shortfall at Q3, and it was a fiber damage that caused me to realize what our shortfall was. So we hit a fiber line. 48 strand fiber wasn't marked. So I personally went on the site. This was about a year ago. I got on the site, and foreman on site, 20-year foreman, veteran in the industry, crew pretty well trained. Foreman does not have damages, steady, does a good job. So when I looked at where he had the fiber cut in the hole, and he said, I don't understand where it comes from. I said, well, it comes down this pole over here, it goes over here. And he said, it goes in that pad. I said, no, that's coax pad. It goes down further into a hand hole. And I said, where's everything else that comes down? Here's three-phase, here's this, and we're figuring it all out. And he looked at me and he said, how do you know that? And I said, well, it's fiber on the pole. That's what that is. I know that because I've dealt with it for years. He said, I don't know that. And then his crew, once he started, his crew looked at me and he said, John, why don't you guys teach us this? I don't know that's a coax pad. I assumed the fiber went in there. So truly, I drove away from that site thinking to myself, we have to do a better job. This is a 20-year foreman in the field that's installed gas for 20 years, but did not understand everything he was looking at in the field. Our locators understand it all day long. We now have a process in place to train our foremen and train our underground crews by the locators how to identify these things. Things have changed in the field over time. Now, that's an excavator for 20 years in the business. If you were a local contractor and you were digging, how would you know? How would you know that's fiber coming down that pole? How would you look around and know what's going on around you if to notice something that's not marked? So to go back to the question, how do you prevent it? Technology can help, but that's some plain old education.
John's company isn't the only one with the same problem, and he works for a large, very successful utility contractor. Imagine all the smaller contractors that are never provided education other than what a veteran on the job site tells them. Yes, the best way to learn is from experience, and that's guaranteed to happen if you're an excavator. But what isn't guaranteed is a formal education to new hires before they get out in the field. Wouldn't education plus field experience be better than jumping into the field with no prior knowledge? We understand not all companies have the current resources to provide education to their workers, and that is why Planet Underground and Staking University are proud to offer an online training program accessible to anyone in the industry from anywhere in the world. These companies understand that taking the extra steps to ensure you avoid damages really does have a return on investment in the long run. That's why we believe our training and testing program is such a unique asset for the industry, because this kind of education doesn't exist on any other platform. If more excavators were educated, we could reduce damages. Education provides knowledge, and knowledge is the most potent tool a company can use to reduce underground utility damage.
There's an advantage to having our own locators. Having our own locators allows us to staff up that locating division to a point where they're not rushed due to production, but more to the point of quality. We staff our locators that do the locating for our own crews on those specific utilities to be staffed well enough to take their time, do a quality job, give them time to hand dig exposed facilities if they have to help locate those accurately. We give them time to look at as-builds. We give them time to figure out the puzzles of locating. Now, the biggest thing is, with our own locating staff, they're working directly for us. Their sole focus is our underground crews. So when they show up on a job site, what they focus on is truly more damage prevention, even more so than a locate contract company would, because they have a stake in the game because it's the same company they're working for. So their detail to accuracy, to troubleshooting is heightened over if they had 100 locates on their board and they had a 10-hour day to get them done.
You know, this job we was back there digging, we noticed there's a forced sewer main back there that nobody even knew about. And we actually set a utility box, power box on top of it. I mean, we had to, you know, finally we have walked that long enough. We found a tracer wire. It actually had a tracer wire with it, so we put our locator on it, and we had to actually get with our engineer and kick our stuff over because they staked it right on top of it. We would have dug it right up. So, you know, it helps. You know, I'm a firm believer in locating.
Without a locator, we wouldn't be able to be successful. I mean, that's really the bottom line.
If we get any bleed off on a locate, we always hook up the TV, phone, sometimes gas, whatever, just to verify that that's the tone we're picking up. Sometimes the crews call us to check some of the locates, and we go out there and check them. But like I said, every locate's different. You go from one training to another, using one frequency, and then the next one you really can't. You got to bump it up or go down, depending on the bleed off. And power mode is another way we double check our locates too.
We have the same equipment as the locating company, whether it be phone, gas, water, cable TV. So we carry that same equipment. Every single crew that works out here in the field for our company, which is a lot of crews, they all have their own utility locators. Without having that piece of equipment, it's just like missing a piece of a puzzle.
I get the gas right there. You can see the water's 9 feet off its mark.
This is one house, okay? This situation with that mark being off that far, that's not a one-off. This project is 5-10 phases. There's hundreds of houses in this area. So our production really increases by verifying the marks over here, because all these houses on this block, it could be the same situation. So if we just verify a mark there, say we hit the water over here, that could happen at 5 or 6 different houses on this block. Now you're down how long, Joe? You know,
I got to get a trench box because the waters are usually deep. You know, I got to call a plumber to fix it because you have to have a license. So, I mean, you got a day just fixing one water service. So that's why when I do a block, 99% of the times I find every water. There'll be one house that may get me, you know, or something goofy going on, but I'll locate, spot every water service and not just do what the 52-inch slot over that water. I'll verify where every water's at. It's just like they say, a happy wife's a happy life, you know, just like my crew. If they're digging on marks and they're not there, they're gonna be miserable. It's 90 to 100 degrees digging on something not there. So if I can make my guys' life easier by just locating, taking the time and training to learn how to locate and make everybody behind me's life easier, it's a lot of work to slot and dig these gases and waters for a laborer. So basically they look at me as a glorified locator. You know, I just double check everybody's marks. My labor's got an easier day, so I'll just stick with the glorified locator title for now.
I mean, a lot of times if you're hand digging, it's kind of silly, I think, not to put your locator on it first time. Make sure that they ain't off 3 or 4 or 5 feet. You know, every time I've ever done a bore or come across utility and them guys will hand dig for 10 minutes or so, I'll usually say, let me go get the locator. You know, and it does help. And I've found very few utility companies ever get on to us about opening up a ped, or, you know, they're more than happy for us to take that extra chance to find it. So, I mean, it's a good deal, I think. I think every crew should have one, you know, big crew. This one's pretty new, we ain't had it very long, but we got it for that and drainage. You know, in these subdivisions, you'll have drainage, and they'll never mark that. They say, you know, that's our responsibility to find it.
One could argue the 811 system needs to adapt to modern times. But until state damage prevention laws change, contractors are going to have to double-check marks and use every resource available to make sure they don't damage anything, because it will cost them. That is why we created courses that educate excavators. Our visual observation, basic utility knowledge, and locate instrument training programs all can educate excavators in a way that has never been done. This online training and testing can be easily accessed and completed at anyone's convenience, perfect for busy contractor personnel. These courses can be used for new hire training or continuing education for existing crews. Either way, the more crews know about utilities, the fewer damages there will be.
And I've said this since probably the day I could locate or trained locators. The biggest thing that an excavator or a homeowner or anybody can see, by walking onto a street or a lot, you can visually look around, and I would safely guess I can tell you what is buried in that ground, at least 3/4 of it, by a visual scan of the whole area. Now, if excavators are educated, and even homeowners, of what things look like, how they come down poles, what PEDs look like, you'd have a general idea of 3/4 of what's buried in that ground without a mark ever being put there. We try to explain to our crews, our underground crews, visual is huge. Is there a carcinite marker? Is there a phone PED that's not marked? Is there a gas meter that's out in the middle of a lot where a building used to be? All these things come into play where if you do a good visual and look around a lot or a city street, you will pick up, again, 3/4 of what's buried in that ground without ever looking at a print. A visual is huge. Now, locators, as they're trained and as they have experience, it's a natural to them. They can walk onto a lot and tell you 10 things that are buried on that lot and never look on a print. Excavators, it's harder to educate them because that's not their job. It should be part of their job. It needs to be an education to excavators that look around. Is there a secondary dropping off a pole that nobody marked? Is there a phone PED in the backyard of this homeowner's house that nobody put any marks around?
For this type of communication, usually there's an incident that happened, and we get to hear all about it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's photos, diagrams. It can go off the rails sometimes, but for the most part, it's a healthy conversation, and it's been a great eye-opening opportunity for me. I hear the money's going towards education, and if it's going to help us in the long run and contractors similar to us be better about damage prevention and help save some lives, I'm all for it.
Just making people aware of it. And now, after being a locator and being in the excavation world, there are things that my brain just didn't recognize. Every day you walk by this and it means, okay, there's just a thing, don't walk into it. And now, you go by and see someone doing something and you're like, okay, there's a pedestal or there's a manhole, there should be marks coming out all over the place. And it's interesting, and it opened my eyes in a way that hopefully I never take for granted. And I think exposing more people to that kind of experience would help draw them in.
Most contractors tend to work with one specific utility, like gas, communications, electric, or water and sewer. Contractors, just like utility company employees, are extremely knowledgeable with the particular utility system they work on. That makes sense, but most of the time, accidents happen to the utilities contractors are working around, not the utility they were hired to install or repair. If something gets damaged, the odds of the contractor being at fault are already high. And although it might not always be fair, it's the reality. That makes veteran locators a huge asset on a job site, especially for excavators who aren't familiar with the utilities they don't normally work with. John's company uses locators to train their underground foremen for this very reason, and it's caused damages to go down. Imagine if all contractors had this level of education of utility systems. Planet Underground and Staking University are proud to offer such education, which we know will contribute to lowering damages and saving lives.
what I've learned and understood and kind of seen over the years is people that dig and join the underground world, everybody has to start somewhere. So people that are new to it and are looking for facilities are not real educated on what a 600 pair phone cable looks like compared to a 144 strand fiber compared to a cable TV drop. These people really don't know. So they uncover a line that they think is the 200 pair phone cable they're looking for, when in actuality, it's a 32 strand fiber that didn't have marks on it. And now they think they found the correct facility, and then they cut the 200 pair. It actually took me a year to watch our underground crews and realize we're hiring a laborer to go out and hand dig with an operator on the backhoe, and the laborer doesn't know what a three-phase concentric primary looks like. They don't know the difference between a steel service and a gas service. These are people that have never seen this before and never seen it dug up. They don't know the difference between a cable TV line on a pole line coming down and a phone line. When they dig one up, they don't know the difference between them. When they're looking at a pedestal, they don't know what's in it. So the challenge becomes to educate the underground world, the contracting side, as much as locators get educated.
Finding things underground that you can't see, it's not an exact science, and it's not easy. There's a lot of different reasons why marks might not be accurate. You know, you could go to a 15-foot wide utility easement. There could be, 4 abandoned phone cables, 4 new phone cables, communication fiber optic cables and regular coax cables for 3 different communication companies. There's power lines. You could have, abandoned power lines, live power lines. You could have 3-phase power lines with 1 phase abandoned and replaced. And not to mention anything else that might be in the ground that might have got thrown in there when they originally built the house.
Doing our own locating. Now, if we do our own locating, for us, we can't dig, but we can figure out our path. At least have an idea of where we're gonna be and try to plan as much as we can with that time while we're waiting for them. So in that aspect, we were successful even with the problems we had with the locating companies, but we could have been more successful if we had locates when they're supposed to be done.
Locating is helpful to contractors for all sorts of reasons. And as you just heard, one reason is to get ahead of late one-call marks. Finding a solution to late one-call tickets is a whole nother topic, but wouldn't 811 locators and third-party contractors be more efficient in the field if the utility companies who hired them made sure they got the education they need, and a continuing education at that? For most companies, the only training you get after being hired is learning from veterans out in the field. But there aren't enough veterans to go around, so a company can settle for it to take a long time for its field workers to learn how systems work and endure the avoidable damages along the way. Or the company can now look to online learning, which will speed things up while providing visual education.
Teaching, I like to lead by example, to be honest with you. I'm not one of those guys, hey, do this, do that, but if they got questions, I'm always here to, answer them, obviously. But if I see something and they'll ask, a lot of times they'll ask me, hey, how'd you know that? I said, follow it. Let's say you're in a parkway and there's like real soft ground, there's a lot of roots. Well, if there's a trench there, the roots go to the softest spot, so that there's a trench there. So look out for some. Hey, those roots are following a line. Just keep following that root, and sure enough, you'll find a utility.
I'll just say from my experience of retiring too, I thought I was generous. I gave 6 months notice. Right?
Yeah.
You can't expect a person, even at 6 months, to say, I'm going to take 35 years of knowledge. Now, let's face it, 10 years of knowledge is probably what's important. The other 25 was, archaic. Yeah. So, you probably don't expect that employee to continue his everyday routine, normal, if you're going to transfer knowledge. That knowledge may have to be transferred to 5, 6 people as well, because you've been there so long, you took on so many responsibilities, you had so many things that you knew. You're gonna kill somebody dumping all that knowledge onto one person. And even at 6 months, and I was trying to do my normal, it wasn't even enough. So, good long planning really has to go in place. And really, that's like putting a crystal ball in the middle of this table and saying, how do I do that? I don't know if there's any real magic bullet for that, other than you try your best to diversify the team that you have and the people you have, and hope that tribal knowledge between all of them kind of comes together, and they can start divvying that up between everybody.
I think having a working knowledge of utility systems in general is a great need. Unfortunately, I'm not sure of an organization that provides that type of a service, except for just over the years of hands-on experience and working in and around their own utility system and other utility systems as they excavate, they're picking up that information. But I believe that having that working knowledge of other utilities, how they operate, what their facilities consist of, just general practices in installation and operations, I think would be a great asset to many others in the various utility industries, from the excavators to the supervisors and inspectors, performing the day-to-day operations.
The tribal knowledge that gets exchanged between veterans and young workers out in the field is clearly the only continuing education that contractors receive. That's because these days it's hard to find veterans to stay with a company, but also because it takes a long time to teach people everything a veteran knows. Planet Underground isn't trying to replace hand-on experience with our online locator certification training. We are just trying to provide a means of education that contractors never had access to before. Training and education can reduce damages, because if everyone in the field knew how all utility systems ran, if they could visually identify everything in the field, they knew how to read maps, and if they understood how to properly locate lines, then less mistakes would be made. Almost all damages are avoidable. Let's make sure contractors have the proper know-how and education to know what they are doing out there.